Welcome to the new look Minnesota Vikings defense. It's so different from everything you knew from last year. So come on, take a ride. Let's get to know the new Minnesota Vikings.
You like that on 3, 1, 2, 3. You like it!
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I am your host, Luke Braun, and let's find some joy today. You can find the Locked On Vikings podcast wherever you find your favorite shows, whether it is Sirius XM, where you can listen to us on the app. You can also listen to the upcoming Vikings game on Sirius XM radio. You can find this show on YouTube or even Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Thank you so much for those of you who do listen to this show every single day. My hashtag everydayers. Sound off if you can. I love hearing from you guys. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Today on the show, we're going over the Brian Flores defense. This is going to be sort of a comprehensive review, a cramming for exams kind of day on all of the defensive stuff we talked about over the course of the offseason. I have done so many shows over the offseason on the Brian Flores defense, from his blitzes, his coverages, the aggression, the philosophy, personnel stuff, all of that stuff. If you don't want to go listen to like hours of that, I mean, if you do, please do. That would be great. But if you don't want to, this is going to be a sort of review. If you've been listening, if you are an everyday or you've been listening all off season, some of this might be more of a review for you. And look, there's some use to that too. But if you haven't paid any attention all off season, let me catch you up on what's been going on. We will start as always with the personnel. So, going from defensive line backwards, the Vikings, I mean, they have Danielle Hunter, right? That was sort of this up and down thing throughout the offseason. He signs a new deal. He's going to be a Viking, probably walk next year unless they want to extend him, which they can, but that's a next year thing. They also replaced Zadarius Smith with Marcus Davenport, basically. They traded Zadarius Smith away for a 5th-round pick. They got Marcus Davenport in there. Marcus Davenport is very much a lineup outside but rush inside kind of guy, which we're going to do a lot of stunting, so that's sort of the scheme fit there. But he is kind of line up over the guard is going to be his best idea, which was sort of Zadarius Smith as well. So that's what we're going to use him for. Famously only got half a sack last year, and we kind of hope that that was a fluke of quarterbacks getting the ball away, and he's also had some health issues. We're sort of hoping that all of that is behind him. And on the interior, we have Harrison Phillips listed as starters, Dean Lowry and Jonathan Bullard, more of the dirty work guys. There's also Kyrie's Tonga. I'm sure will rotate in plenty as well. For off-ball linebackers, this is a 3-4, so we only have the two of them. That's going to be Jordan Hicks and Brian Asamoah. Also keep an eye out for Ivan Pace, maybe subbing in sometimes. He had a phenomenal preseason, undrafted rookie. That was sort of the talk of all of the preseason. I wouldn't be surprised to see him getting in from scrimmage just rotationally, depending on the package and the needs, which we will get to what that will be. And then in the secondary, Byron Murphy and Caleb Evans are your corners. Byron Murphy, a little smaller, but I really like him actually as a CB1. And then Caleb Evans is a bigger body and I think has some other some aggression to gain, I think, in coverage, but I would rather you underreact than overreact, so he gets to start pretty easily. You also have Mekhi Blackman playing nickel, or if they want their big nickel, their 3-safety package, that'll be Josh Metellus, and then with Cam Bynum and Harrison Smith behind him. Harrison Smith's very much going to be roaming all around the formation like he did in the Zimmer days, and this defense is going to look a lot like it used to in the Zimmer days. So I think, as with always, to understand the defense, you have to understand how it works against the run first. You always kind of have to start with the run, and then that will tell you a lot about how things operate in the past. But if we talk about like base defense, right, with your 3 defensive linemen, quote unquote, your interior guys, and then 2 edge rushers on the outside, so 5 guys usually on the line of scrimmage, 2 linebackers, and then 4 defensive backs, the Vikings are going to use a lot of bear front type stuff and also like kind of 3-4 under fronts, which is going to mean 5 guys on the line of scrimmage in some sort of configuration. They like to tighten all those guys on the interior though. And, you know, you'll have 3 people lined up inside both of the guards. They're all right on top of each other. And essentially what that is screaming to the offense is, don't you dare run this up the middle. Look at all these guys up there. Go outside with this. This is what we want you to do. You're trying to encourage them to run outside because guess what? It's slower to go east and west than it is to go north and south, and it gives us our guys time to fill and put together a more coherent run fit. And to understand run fits, I think the most important thing is you got to understand everybody has their job, and these jobs are not glamorous. This is dirty work. Fitting the run is not about everybody just chase and go try to get a tackle, which I think gives us, like, there's a Madden understanding of it that I think can kind of get in our heads sometimes of like, well, whoever got the tackle made the play, right? But it's not really the case. A lot of times your job is just crack down on that guy and just make sure that that particular blocker doesn't do his job, and then your teammates are going to fill in for you. It requires a genuine unselfishness. You'll find among like defensive tackles a lot of unselfish players. If we're tightening everything up and using like what's called a bear front, that's a bear front, or a tight front means they're just inside the tackles rather than inside the guards. So if we're using that, we're trying to really clog up the middle. We're saying, please run outside. In order to not get punished for saying that, you need to set the edge. So you need a couple of edge rushers that are big, strong dudes. If you want some cope for the Zadarius Smith trade, this is that. Zadarius Smith was not this kind of guy. He was a finesse dude. And he penetrated, and he was great for what he did. But this job didn't fit him as well. And I think it fits Marcus Davenport, who's a little bit more stout, a little better, and perhaps not as quick and not as disruptive, but he can set the edge. And that's going to be an important part of this. And when I say set the edge, think about an edge rusher versus a tackle, right? Think outside zone. So that tackle is trying to kick that edge rusher out of the play so that there's this big alley in the B gap between the tackle and the guard. That's what that offensive tackle is trying to do. So the edge rusher, the Danielle Hunter, is going to just fight that and say, no, I'm going to squeeze that lane down. I don't want that lane to be big. I want that to be like a little tiny lane that you have to kind of barely chug through, and then a linebacker can get in there and fill it up nicely. If you can do that and be difficult to move as an edge rusher, all of the run game gets so much harder. Everything has to cut back. This is where the defensive tackles come in. Whether they are super tightened up and saying, please run outside, or look, everybody's running outside anyways, you don't even need to really ask. Maybe they're in like an underfront or an overfront, either way, where they're usually going to be taking on some kind of double team against these zone runs or these duo runs, which, by the way, lots of that from the Bucks. So we'll get a heavy dose of this week one. Usually these guys are getting double teamed or combo blocked in some kind of way, right? And if they're going one-on-one, then that's awesome, right? Then we can just kind of say, oh, we got a size advantage up front. Let's go, kick some butt. But a lot of times they'll be double teamed. So all they're trying to do is just hold their spot on the double team, hold as much ground as they can, and then kind of feel it. Are these guys going to the left, to the right? Is somebody trying to climb up on me, or are they just trying to move me? And sort of go counter to whatever those guys are doing. So if they're trying to move me to the left, I might just kind of get across their face and just lag behind the play a little bit to the right. And it's like you take like a 6-inch step and then you just start fighting. And what that does is it gets you into the backfield and it starts taking away cutback lanes. And cutting off those cutback lanes that we just sort of have encouraged. So basically what we're trying to lure the offense into doing, and offenses in today's modern NFL love to do this, so it's not asking a lot from them. We want them to start a run to the outside and then get that run to cut back so that we can cut off those cutback lanes. And if we can cut off those cutback lanes, then we can hopefully just corral, and then it doesn't matter how shifty you are, we're tackling you. It requires a lot of feel and a lot of sort of, it's not so much a one gap, two gap, I've got this gap, this is my responsibility. It's more of, okay, I'm kind of feeling that they're trying to run strong side zone, so I'm just going to lag off to the weak side a little bit. Now this is my gap. And then for the linebackers, they kind of have to read what the defensive tackles are doing. And hey, if that guy lags back a little bit, now he's in one gap, the linebackers have to know which gap that means he vacated, and they have to kind of fill it for him. And then hopefully you have everything gapped out well. Again, that's a lot of, I just kind of took away the cutback lane so that he didn't run away from you who really got the tackle. And it's a lot of, I just set the edge. I pushed the tackle and I made the running back cut back into Harrison Phillips, and he actually got credit for the TFL, but I did my job. You have to be very unselfish, and that's true of all run fits, and honestly, football in general. It's a team sport, right? Not a me sport. But that's your general idea of how these run fits work, which move linebackers horizontally pretty frequently. And ideally, they've got in the run, you've got your 5 defensive linemen. Of course, if you're in your nickel package, the math is going to work out a little bit differently, but they'll probably have one fewer blocker because they're probably in 11 personnel. And that brings me to what we do with coverage and the coverage family that the Vikings are in. It's a familiar one. They're back to the Zimmer world of cover 7. The Belichick world, which is where Flores obviously came up, Saban, all of that. We're back into that world. So I'm excited to be able to break down another season of that world, and kind of explain some of the ins and outs of that rule set to you. Before I do that, however, it is so important to get a good shave, because if you don't have a good shave, you just don't feel good. You don't feel prim and proper. You know what I'm talking about? And boys, there is absolutely no shame in a little bit of self-care, especially when it comes to your skin. Harry's has you covered for the best shave of your life. They have high-quality razors and skin products like exfoliating face wash and hydrating lotion that make you feel nice and pampered like you deserve, fellas. Their starter set is a $13 value, and you can get it for just $3 at harrys.com/NFL. It has a 5-blade German-engineered razor, a weighted handle, foaming shave gel, and a travel cover for when you're on the go. Get your best shave ever this summer with Harry's razors and skincare products. Get a $13 starter set for just $3 at harrys.com/NFL. That's harrys.com/NFL for a $3 starter set. Thanks again for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day. Make sure you check out the ultimate NFL preview stuff we're doing. It's all over at the Locked On NFL page. It is a 7-episode behemoth of all 32 Locked On NFL team hosts, myself included, getting together division by division to debate stuff like who the best quarterback in the division is, who's going to make the playoffs that didn't last year, who might fall off, what aren't we talking about that we should be about these teams. Really cool stuff. And hey, look, sometimes it gets a little spicy. Go check that out at the Locked On NFL feed. As for us, we're going to talk a little bit about coverage. So let's start with what I'll call their base coverage, which is quarters. That might not be the one they call the most often, but I think it's a good foundation, a good place to start. Quarters you might think of as cover 4 in like a Madden sense with like zone. Don't think of it that way. Quarters in the modern NFL is a man coverage fundamentally. It is man techniques. It is man to man. It is guys running routes and I have to cover them. It's just a set of rules that tells you who you're actually covering, and it's determined post snap. So instead of saying, all right, I got 18, you go, I have the number 1. And if they do some crazy change before the snap or at the snap that changes who the number 1 is, and if you aren't familiar, defenses label receivers by counting from outside in. So the outermost receiver is the 1, the next guy in is the 2, the next guy in is the 3, and often that's like the running back, but you count. It's just a counting system so that we can have a communication to label those guys. Not wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. It's literally just like physically where if CJ Ham splits out wide, he's the 1. So quarters, or some people call it man match cover 7. And the 7 just means because there's 7 people in coverage and we're rushing 4. This is your kind of classic version. It might be more of a 6 for Flores because of the fact that he loves to just rush 5 and kind of live in a basic system of rushing 5 and covering with 6. But I don't want to call it cover 6 because that means a different thing to most people. So either way, whatever you want to call it, it is this sort of rule set, and you'll usually divide the field in 2. And on one side of the field, you will call one set of rules, and they've got all these different these are like the plays in the defensive playbook: cone and mix and stuff and stubby and all of these other words that mean all these cool things. There's a book behind me, if you're watching on YouTube, called The Pass Coverage Glossary by Cameron Saran. It's a phenomenal one for all of this that will teach you at least some handful of those, and you'll get a sense for the rule set. But a lot of times it's, okay, this is one. We'll have, the corner has the number one in man everywhere he goes. So that's okay. Byron Murphy, you have the number one wide receiver wherever he goes. You're just in man coverage, and that's that. And then the safety and the apex, or the second guy in, so that would be, let's say, Mekhi Blackman and Cam Bynum, you're bracketing the number two. And we'll call that if they've got, Chris Godwin as the number two. If they put Chris Godwin in the slot, we'll call that coverage. I believe what I just described is cone. So we'll call cone, and now we're double teaming Chris Godwin, and Byron Murphy's on an island and we trust him. Then on the other side, we'll call a different one that has another version of that rule. Maybe we have that time the safety is reading 2-to-1 robber, which means he's reading the 2. If the 2 goes vertical, I've got him. If the 2 doesn't go vertical and the 1 goes vertical, I've got him instead. And if neither of those guys go vertical, I look to the other side of the field and see if there's something coming across, like a deep over or something, that I can sort of slow play and lag and try to lure the quarterback into an interception. That's 2-to-1 robber, right? You read the 2, then the 1, and then you rob. That would be an assignment in a different coverage. And then maybe somebody, if that's the case, then the apex on that side will wall the number 2. Because if he's going vertical, meaning the safety has him, right? The safety's got 2-to-1 robber. So if the 2 is going vertical, that means the nickel on that side, or it would probably be a linebacker, does not have the 2, right? But I'm going to wall him, which means get a push on him as he comes by. I'm going to throw an arm into him and try to disrupt his rhythm, and then I'll do a zone, right? That's the kinds of rule sets that we're working with. That's your basic setup. Possibly you're going to see it a little bit more common that they're just in straight up man-to-man, cover 1, cover 0. And that's man-to-man across the board. Sometimes you can pair that with like these sorts of rule sets and switch release rule sets and stuff like that to try to combat some of the fancy things offenses will do. But by and large, you get that guy, you get that guy, you get that guy. Everybody cover, good luck. And you'll have cover 1, we'll have 1 deep defender. And if you're doing math, right, you have, call it 4 pass rushers, 5 guys in man-to-man coverage against their 5 eligible receivers, 1 deep defender, that's 10 people. We have 1 guy left over. And that guy can do a myriad of things, which depends on what kind of cover 1. In cover 1 rat, he is a middle zone defender. In cover 1, or there's a cover 1 robber, he lines up, he's still a middle zone defender, but that extra guy is lining up deep as a safety first and then coming down. There's cover 1 cross, where he'll pick up a shallow cross and then somebody else becomes the new middle defender. There's cover 1 dog, where he'll blitz. There's all kinds of different stuff. There's cover 1 double, where he'll just double team a guy. This is the Julio Jones treatment, the Calvin Johnson treatment, right? So cover 1 double 18 is something that I believe the Eagles called against us a lot in week 2 last year. You're doubling number 18, right? There's all kinds of different cover 1, and then there's also a cover 3 structure, which is Rip Liz. This is another very Saban-y thing, Nick Saban, Alabama thing, where you'll look like it's a 2-high structure, and then one of the safeties rotates down, and the call is either Rip, which means the right one goes, or Liz, which means the left one goes. There is your coverage structure crash course. Honestly, diagnosing coverages in this world, I think, is going to be a little easier than it was in the Fangio world. And there's a really big difference here in the fact that we are man covering. Vic Fangio and Ed Donatel were not man covering. They were zone covering. They were trying to play zone match. Guys were too late to really be as tight to routes as they wanted to, which is one of the fundamental problems that sort of caused everything to fall apart. But they were saying, hey, no, you have the middle, right? You've got from the hash to the hash and 5 yards deep, and you man cover whoever comes in there. But it's not about the 2 and the 3 and the blah, blah, blah. It's the innermost guy. It's the deepest guy. It's the, it's the hitch against these concepts. And it was a little bit more reading. This is, okay, there's like 2 if-thens, right? You're a safety. You've got 3 different possible assignments. You're either reading the 2, the 1, or you're robbing. And by the time you're through the 2 and the 1, you're just robbing. And if nobody comes across and you didn't do anything, they were just running a different concept, and that's okay. We've got it handled by somebody else. That is going to be a fundamental difference. But the other fundamental difference is that the Vikings are going to blitz a lot. The Fangio philosophy that Ed Donatel had here last year was we can rush 4. Those 4 are going to get home because we're going to have really soft sound coverage on the back end that either is going to take them forever for the route concepts that beat it to develop, or they're going to have to resort to a bunch of quick game, in which case we can get downhill and tackle. And that just didn't work for a bunch of reasons we don't need to rehash. Now it's like, nah, F you. We're coming. We're bringing 5 all the time. And we're going to bring 6 and 7 and 8 sometimes too. So the rule sets for that, I think, are really important to know and understand. And then behind those blitzes, depending on how many people in coverage, then you start working in your man match, your triangle coverages, which is, 3 cover players. That cone is a triangle coverage because there's 3 cover players and they all get their assignment, right? Or box coverages versus 3x1 because you'll have 4 defenders over 3 receivers. And since there's 4 defenders, it's a box coverage. Get it? So I want to get into those blitz packages and really talk about what makes the Flores defense the Flores defense. But before I do that, hey, you might still be able to get tickets to this game against the Buccaneers and watch them come out in their throwbacks, all the Bud Grant stuff they're going to do. But it's kind of last minute, and that's going to make things hard. But that is what Gametime is for. The Gametime app makes it so you don't have to plan months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, concerts, live theater, comedy shows, whatever it is. And they have a Gametime guarantee, which means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. So you can get pictures of your seat before you buy, so you know you're not getting stuck behind a pillar or something stupid like that, and you're getting a view that you're okay with. Buy the tickets in a matter of seconds. It's literally like 2 taps, and you're good to go. And you can find these flash deals and last-minute tickets on things that you otherwise would have been paying insane markups for. It's what Gametime is for. So get the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that is LOCKEDONNFL when you create an account and redeem that code for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, we've all had our vegetables by talking about the run game and our coverages. Now we can have dessert. It's time to talk about the blitzes. This is where the Flores thing gets super, super, super fun. Flores loves to go, he loves to go all out and go cover 0. So if cover 1 is 1 deep defender, what's your guess for what cover 0 is? That means everybody's coming, right? And that does mean that whoever is actually covering on the back end needs to cover their guy properly. If you get cooked off the line of scrimmage, the quarterback might just take 3 steps and throw up a fade and it's a touchdown, and all this blitz crap didn't matter. So that's really important on the back end, which is why you're going to see these corners play off a lot. It's a really key component to these blitzes to have off-man coverage. All you have to do is not get beat off the line of scrimmage, so give them 10 yards of cushion. And by the time they've eaten that up, hopefully we've got a free rusher and we're disrupting things in the backfield. And these are designed to guarantee a free rusher at great cost of bodies, right? We're sending a lot of people to guarantee a free rusher. So the best way to go over this, I think, is just to talk about like what a play call will be like. So it'll be something like sub odd, which will be like a formation, and then ram left, me right, which tells you that on the left side, we're doing a ram stunt, which is where the 0 technique, which in sub odd would actually be like Ivan Pace, is actually going to loop all the way around the tackle. And then the 2 defensive linemen outside of him are going to crash inwards. And then that's why we do that out of sub odd, because we've got a quick linebacker, right? And then me is just a regular tackle and exchange stunt, and that's happening on the right. So we've got 2 stunts happening simultaneously out of this formation, and that's the philosophy here. That can't take too long to set up. If you're going to do a lot of stunting and twisting and stuff, you can't just sit there and be crossing each other's faces all the time. The quarterback's just going to say, okay, you're not even pass rushing, and throw the ball, right? So you have to set that up quickly. And that's why we'll do that with, quicker guys. That's the point of Marcus Davenport, the point of having somebody like Dean Lowry in there instead of what Dalvin Tomlinson was. That's one of the main principles of blitz here. One is to stunt a lot, and the other one is to send a lot of guys. It's a numbers game, right? So if you have these cover zero blitzes, they'll line a whole bunch of people up on the line of scrimmage. Whether it's double A-gap mug, Mike Zimmer style, we're going to see plenty of that, or lining up 8 guys on the line of scrimmage. All of those really fun third down things that Mike Zimmer did over all of his years here, that stuff's back. I don't think it's quite as inventive as Mike Zimmer. I don't think anything ever will be. But in principle, that stuff is back. And one of the key rules that I think you should understand is the center is always wrong. These are designed to make the center always wrong. So let's say you've got 2 linebackers, Hicks and Asamoah. They are lined up over the A-gap, right? They're in a 2-point stance, and they're both threatening blitz on either side of the center. The center is going to make some call based on whatever they've talked about, film study, rule sets, their installs and all that. He's going to make some kind of call to say, and sometimes it's already in the play call, the protection is going to slide one way or another, right? The center is going to take one of those 2 linebackers or another. Whichever one the center turns toward backs into coverage. So the center will always be wrong about which guy he takes. That guy backs into coverage, and then the other guy slips in right behind the center, and you should get a free rusher that way. And if you're not getting a free rusher that way, hopefully you're setting it up with stunts. And if you're not getting it with stunts, hopefully you've just got enough bodies. And if you also don't have enough bodies, then you probably aren't blitzing. Then this is probably a 4-man rush. That has been very, very effective over all of Brian Flores' career. And hey, also Bill Belichick's and all of these other Patriots people that have come off of the Belichick tree that have scattered throughout defenses in the league. By the way, Todd Bowles also absolutely does this kind of thing. So this is kind of a mirror match of defenses coming up. All of that stuff is very, very effective at generating free rushers, but it's not effective at generating free rushers without sacrificing something on the back end. And that's where you can get to what this defense can really die from is if those guys in off-man coverage get smoked, these blitzes don't matter, and now you get your blitzes punished, right? These guys are on an island. They have absolutely no help at all. And so they have incredibly difficult jobs with incredible high leverage on them. So if the blitzes get home, offenses will fall apart. If they do not get home, offenses will have the easiest day of their lives. Quarterbacks, I should say, will have the easiest day of their lives. So we're going to live in this world of volatility. We're going to have games where we give up 40 because they picked up the blitzes, and we're going to have games where we give up 6 because they didn't and we got 3 turnovers. We'll have games where the defense outscores the offense, like their offense. And then we'll have games where we get absolutely torched. Welcome to the Thunderdome. We're on a roller coaster here. Everybody close your eyes, take your Dramamine. This one's going to be wacky. This is the whole season, by the way. I'm not just talking about week 1. So to kind of tie all this together, let me layer a bunch of these things together. And here's what a play call might sound like. We'll start from the one we just talked about. Sub odd, Ram left, me right. Okay, so sub odd is our front. That tells us sub odd is one with Ivan Pace lining up at nose tackle, which is going to be kind of a third down thing because obviously he's smaller and he's going up against his center. They would love to run into that, so we have to do this in a situation where there's no run. So we'll call this a third down play call. Sub odd, we've got Ram left, me right. Those are the stunts I talked about. And then you'll have cone, strong, mix weak. Cone and mix are 2 of the triangle coverages, the 3-man coverage kind of groupings that you would give. So you've got 5 pass rushers here. You've got 6 people in man match cover 7 kind of coverage. And hopefully picking up on whatever their concepts are. And then you've got a bunch of stunting stuff going on trying to get immediate pressure. That would be a third down play call. I absolutely made that up. I'm sure they have different words for all of their stuff as well. So, don't take that as insider information at all. I just read it from a book that you can also buy, and I recommend that you do. But there's your Brian Flores defense and the essential guts of what makes it go. And by the way, all of that has been stuff that has been studied plenty since Brian Flores became a head coach in Miami years and years ago. And honestly, 90% of that is from Belichick anyways. So don't mistake me for releasing any major state secrets. This stuff's been out there, and it's a classic for a reason. It's all over the league, and we're a team that runs it now too. Tomorrow is Crossover Thursday, so we're going to talk about how all this stuff actually lines up against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with David Harrison of Locked On Bucks. And then Friday, we'll actually go into the season preview stuff, have some fun segments, some recurring favorites that I think you guys are going to love. So make sure you stick around for that. I will see you all tomorrow for Crossover Thursday. And as always, Skull.